Welcome to Hard Talk. I'm Zeinab Badawi. Kenya is the first country to have a sitting president and vice president tried on charges of crimes against humanity at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. They're accused of orchestrating ethnic-based violence in 2007, in which 1,200 were killed and 600,000 forced to flee their homes. They say they are not guilty. My guest today is Amina Mohamed, Kenya's foreign minister. Kenya is threatening to withdraw from the ICC, but how much damage would that do to its international reputation? Foreign Minister Amina Mohamed, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Do you believe that President Uhuru Kenyatta and Vice President William Ruto of Kenya should be standing trial at the International Criminal Court, the ICC, in The Hague?
No.
Why not?
They're not guilty.
Oh, you've decided that, even before they stood trial?
Well, I've decided that because the pot of evidence that has been used in the Kenyan cases is the same for the 6 suspects that were before the court in the beginning. 3 of them have been dismissed. 3 of the cases have been dismissed. There's nothing additional that happened that could have led to the president and the deputy president being in court today.
And we also have the radio presenter Joshua Arap-Sang also standing trial with William Ruto.
They're the 3 that are left, actually.
All right, but then I put it to you, you say that so categorically, but the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, herself a former Gambian minister, Fatou Bensouda, says of William Ruto, who's standing trial right now, when she was opening the case against him, he is a powerful politician who planned the crimes to satisfy his thirst for power. She said William Ruto gathered together an army of youths to go to war for him in the event the election in 2007 was lost. When he lost that election, he gave the order to attack. That's pretty categorical.
Well, he wasn't standing for president of the republic. He wasn't.
He was contesting elections in 2007,
he was contesting
and at the time he was on the other side
as a member of parliament, and he will win that any time of the day, because he's a popular politician.
But I wasn't asking whether he was going to win the election, or I'm just putting to you.
So if he didn't lose the elections, he didn't lose the elections. It's a presidential
candidate.
He
was backing Raila Odinga's party at the time. Raila Odinga didn't win, and that's what she means by when he lost that election, he gave the order to attack. Well, he didn't lose the election. Okay, but he gave the order to attack. What about that?
He didn't. I mean, that's what the prosecution says. That's what the prosecution says. But I'll tell you, from 2008 to date, William Ruto has been on a campaign of reconciling the different Kenyan ethnic groups. He has done that relentlessly. He has done that courageously, whether it was those that were affected by the activities that went on in 2007 and 8, or those that weren't. He made sure that all the Kenyan communities came together. He, together with our current president, right, have so much confidence of the electoral that they overwhelmingly won the next general elections.
That may all be true, that they are now working for reconciliation. They won the elections in the Jubilee coalition. They have been. But the point I was putting to you is this, and my original question was, do you think they should be standing trial? You say no, they are not guilty. But you know,
they shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be.
Let me give you examples.
But why do you think then, if they shouldn't be, why is the ICC in this case against them?
Because it wasn't even the ICC that brought the case against them initially. It wasn't. But in any case,
hang on. Can I just get you on that? You said it wasn't the ICC who brought the case.
South Africa, Ireland, right? Crimes committed, atrocities committed. The people came together. They had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that had nothing to do with justice. People sat around the table, right? They discussed issues. They concluded those issues. Why? Because countries must move forward. Okay, you said it wasn't the ICC that brought this case, but you know, when the when the WACI Commission was set up, Kofi Annan was leading mediation efforts and also the post-election reconciliation process. The WACI National Commission, looking at post-election violence, said Kenya set up a tribunal to try and see who was responsible for those 1,200 people who died in very, very brutal circumstances, 600,000 forced to flee their homes. So that commission said,
if you don't set up a tribunal and do it properly, then it's going to have to go to the ICC. And Kofi Annan said the ICC was a court that was seen as a last resort. He said there should be no doubt it was the Kenyan government's own failure to provide justice to the victims and their survivors that paved the way to the ICC.
You know, circumstances do change. Societies and communities are dynamic. What was true in 2007 is definitely not true of my country today. We have a new constitution that was promulgated in 2010. It provides for a totally reformed judiciary and a judicial process that actually can pass muster, right? We have had cases before our courts that had the confidence of the people. What was true in 2007 is definitely not true today.
So you can just change the rules, because it was all agreed at the time, President Mwai Kibaki, the Prime Minister, Raila Odinga, the Parliament, that if there was inaction on this point of trying to bring to justice those who were responsible for the killings, if there was inaction, then it would go to the ICC, and all Kenyan leaders said, fine, we'll abide by that.
Zeinab,
now you're saying you have the right to change your minds?
No, it's not about changing minds. It's about societies moving forward. It's about societies reconciling. It's about societies, after reconciling, electing overwhelmingly those that the international community had put at The Hague. So there is a completely different set of circumstances today. And you know what? There was an envelope that was handed to Kofi Annan. It did not contain 6 names. It did not contain 6 names. They picked and chose. It was politicized from the beginning. How can it be true that they're conducting a case, right, and that they chose 6 out of an envelope of I don't know how many, and of the 6, 3 were from one side of the political divide, the other 3 were from the other side? If that is not politicizing the case, tell me what is. If they had stood up and said, listen, atrocities were committed, 1 or 2 people were responsible, these are the people, and it wouldn't have mattered from what side of the political divide they were, right? Then it would have been much easier for people to say, oh, well, you know what? This is fair, this is objective, this is right, this is a search for justice.
So you're saying, so your government's position is saying that Fatou Bensouda, the chief prosecutor at the ICC, does not really want to take this trial
No,
on.
I'm not saying that.
All right,
I'm not
because
saying
she
that.
is, and you know, and
well, you know what?
She's given interviews. I mean, she said it in an interview to the BBC
She's
recently. She's alarmed at attempts to interfere with the witnesses. She says they're going to be reluctant for some witnesses to appear in prosecutions. Can I finish what she said? Against a president and vice president. She's worried about reluctance of witnesses to turn up.
You know what? She actually dragged my deputy president.
She what?
He was dragged to court last week on Tuesday. Then he's informed, right, at the beginning of the hearings, oh, well, you know what? The witnesses were not able to travel, so they haven't turned up. So, you know, go away, Deputy Prime Minister, come back next week, right? How can you do that?
Deputy President,
yes,
I mean. Well, he's back, he's back. His case was adjourned, but it's now back. Okay, so...
But how do you do that? You have 5 years to prepare a case, right?
Yep.
How is it possible that you can... A leader who has constitutional...
Yeah.
But they're hearing.
He's standing trial.
Yes.
If you say he's got nothing, no case to answer, he's standing trial.
Well, because we are cooperating with the court. We committed ourselves
to cooperate. Are you cooperating with the court?
Absolutely.
You don't want to withdraw? There was a vote in the Kenyan Parliament, first step in making Kenya withdraw from the ICC.
Yes, there's a vote in the Parliament. The motion was passed. I foresee that they would repeal our act, first of all, that domesticated the Rome Statute, and obviously the next step will be withdrawal, right? But we have been there before. It's not the first time that the Parliament has passed that motion, okay?
And you know that motion was called by opponents of the President a capricious and ill-considered move. The supporters of Raila Odinga,
it's an independent, it's a democratic
party, that's
institution.
What they said about this.
It's an independent institution. It's a democratic institution. It's a parliament. Parliaments debate issues. So parliaments, you know, parliamentarians can walk out of a debate, right?
Which they did do.
Yes, which they did do. So that is their right.
So let's make this clear then. You are saying that the Kenyan government, Kenya, is going to withdraw from the ICC.
The Parliament has passed a motion.
So that's
the government has 3 arms.
That's going to happen.
Right? The Parliament has passed a motion.
You're one of 34 African countries that signed up to the ICC.
Yep.
What are the implications
With the majority.
for the rest? What are the implications then for other African countries?
Well, I think that if there's a feeling that the space that we had to cooperate with the court, right, is shrinking, and that it becomes difficult for other countries to even think of themselves in the same situation, yeah, obviously they'll need to make their own. They'll need to make their own call, and they'll need to draw their own conclusions.
But you're doing more than that. You've been spearheading efforts at lobbying. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, the chairperson of the African Union, you've been to say, look, we want the AU to say that what the ICC is doing is not correct. There's going to be an extraordinary meeting called of the AU in October to discuss the African Union's relationship with the ICC.
But that's always healthy to do. I think one should always look at their relationships, whether they are personal relationships or others. Right? I think that's important to do.
But it's
because
more than that, isn't it?
As of today, the only ones standing trial at The Hague are Africans. So why shouldn't Africa examine its relationship with the ICC?
But
After all...
Can I just say, you just say Africans, yeah, 4 out of those 8 cases refer to the ICC. It's true they're all African. 4 out of those 8 cases were actually originated by the governments themselves. And another two were actually also sanctioned by their governments. So the majority of cases are actually originated by Africans.
How does that mean that you should not examine your relationship?
Actually originated by
Africans. How does that mean that you should not examine your relationship? How does that mean you should not examine your relationship?
But it's more than that, Minister, isn't it? It's more than just examining the relationship.
It's actually wrong to say that anybody lobbied anybody to do anything. We had a resolution, a decision made by the AU summit in July of this year. There was another decision made in January of this year. Okay? You cannot just have decisions and not implement them. You cannot have decisions and look at whether those decisions were implemented or not.
The African Union, and including the Ethiopian Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn, they all said that this is not a good situation, that you have the ICC cases are all African. But it's more than that. That's the point I'm saying to you. The Tanzanian government spokesperson, Azam Mwambena, has said just now, there is a proposal in the African Union coming in January for all African Union countries to withdraw from the ICC because the court is seen to be targeting African leaders.
Last January.
So there you are.
Last January.
So that means...
But I can't speak for Tanzania.
But for this... Yeah, no, but I'm saying that it's more than just you saying that it's not right that President Kenyatta and Vice President Ruto are at the ICC. You're trying to get all of the African Union behind you.
We're not trying to get anybody behind us. The discussion is about the relationship of Africa with the ICC. It is a relationship that must take place. It has to take place. We must examine that relationship. We are the largest constituency, party to the Rome Statute. We have made several requests to the Security Council, to the court, to others on issues before the ICC, thinking and hoping that other state parties would actually look at the request we are making and at least respond to us, right? And for a long time, there's no response. And only when Africa starts getting together is when we get very hurried responses given to us. So it has to be a relationship of partnership. It has to be a relationship
all African countries.
Equals.
All African countries.
And all other state parties. Africans are not junior partners.
All right. What happens when the Sudanese Justice Minister, Mohamed said last year the ICC is guilty of applying a double standard policy? No, I'm just asking Tanya if you agree with what he has said. Do you agree with what he said last year? The ICC is guilty of applying a double standard policy which has pushed the African countries to consider withdrawing from the Hague-based court. Is there a double standard policy, is he right?
It's a perception. It's out there.
But do you agree with that perception?
Well, it needs to be addressed. It's a perception that's out there. So you
kind of agree with him?
Well, I don't agree. It's a perception that's there.
There is a double standard policy. Does it apply to...
the very bad habit, right, of actually sometimes, right, making it impossible to see the truth.
But do you have any sympathy with his view when he's talking about Umar al-Bashir, the president of Sudan, and President Kenyatta of
Well, who
Kenya?
else is before the ICC?
You've also got Charles Taylor, former president of Liberia.
Who else? And where are they from?
You've got Laurent Gbagbo, from the Ivory Coast. You've got Jean-Pierre Bemba, the former vice president of the DRC. They are all African. But what I'm saying is, are you saying that Africans should just ask for an exception for Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto and leave Umar al-Bashir and all these others to be part of the ICC system?
I think if one looked at the requests that were made by the AU, right, one would not draw those conclusions that you're drawing. One would not. The difference that there is between Kenya and Sudan right? And we actually have talked on behalf of Sudan on this issue many times because Sudan is a key player in ensuring that there is peace in that part of Africa, right?
Sure.
So, but Kenya is a state party to the Rome Statute. So
and so were these other countries that I mentioned, not Sudan.
No, well,
it's not signed up. But I'm just asking you, do the Africans stand together on this issue, or are you going to be cherry-picking which leaders should and which countries should remain part of the ICC and which shouldn't? I
think every country signs and commits itself to international instruments. It signs and ratifies instruments without asking others whether it should be party or not. We signed, definitely did not ask the others, and so obviously decisions will have to be made by individual independent countries.
Because you were saying, of course, that throughout this, you weren't just talking about the ICC's treatment of Kenya alone, you were also saying there is this fact that, that it's African leaders only who are being pursued.
There's a perception.
So don't you trust the ICC to act impartially when it carries out these trials?
I'm a state party, and the Rome Statute it's impartial, it's objective. We signed onto it because we actually believed in what's enshrined in it. We do not like the way the goalposts keep moving. We do not like the way the space for cooperating with the ICC keeps shrinking. That is a problem that we have with the court. And it is an issue that we're going to address at the Assembly of State Parties, because that's where parties to the Rome Statute gather to discuss issues that relate to the court.
What do you say to Kofi Annan, again, mediating Kenya's post-election trials, when he said the trials are not an assault on Kenya's sovereignty, but the first steps towards a sustainable peace? I'll just finish the quote, if you don't mind, Minister, that Kenyans want deeply, a sustainable peace that Kenyans want deeply, making clear that no one is above the law is essential.
Kenyans spoke at the general elections. 40 million Kenyans spoke and decided that they were going to elect His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta as their president and Honorable William Ruto as their deputy president. I do not expect anybody else to speak for Kenyans. Kenyans can actually speak for themselves, and they've spoken loudly and clearly. So seriously, I mean, if one could speak for Kenya in 2007, it doesn't mean that that can be
Well, he has said this more recently, actually. But so you're telling us now that Kenya's going to withdraw from the ICC. Seriously? Kenya's going to withdraw from the ICC, and you as foreign minister, you're not worried about the impact. The Parliament will take that decision, and if it happens, you as foreign minister of this country are not worried about the impact that will have on your reputation when you go around countries.
Well, you know, let me tell you something. Countries do withdraw from international instruments. They do. And I can give you a whole list of countries that have withdrawn very recently from international instruments. We have countries that have signed and unsigned international instruments. So Kenya, I mean, if it chose to withdraw, which is not the case right now, we are cooperating and we are founding members of the court. But if it actually did happen, then it should not be seen as something that is happening outside the norm. It shouldn't.
I just want to ask you now, because we saw that terrible violence. Has Kenya now, you've talked about reconciliation efforts and so on, has it put that ethnic-based hostility that we saw behind it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kenyans came out to vote in the millions. They stood in lines for long periods of time. The Kenyans that came out at 18 years old, at 100 years old. Right? Why? Because they wanted to put everything behind them. They knew that they had a new constitution. There was a new dispensation. Right? There were institutions that were new, refreshed institutions. Kenyans have confidence in their country. But they had hope going forward that everything would be okay. We are the Kenyans that were there in 2007.
But they want the accountability, don't they? They want to know exactly. Those people who were traumatized by that violence, they want to know who's going to stand and be tried for that.
Countries deal with these issues differently. I'll give you an example of Ireland. Right? There were atrocities committed there. They sat around the table, they had truth and reconciliation, and they walked away.
They had people in prison as well. But anyway,
you know,
so you're
South
saying,
Africa,
so what's the, so that's your alternative?
They're less They were less whatever atrocious than we were. Are you telling me that the violence that was committed there was less than ours? Are you telling us that the lives of South Africans were less than ours? Is that what you're saying?
But you're saying now that Kenya has put all this hostility behind it, and actually I'm saying to you, you're a bit too optimistic about that. If you look at the eminent Harvard professor, Kenyan-born Kalesta Juma, writing very recently, saying that the challenge to democracy in Africa, talking also about Kenya, is not ethnic diversity, it's the use of identity politics to promote narrow tribal interests. It's tribalism. You still do have that. So, for example, the majority Kikuyu tribe vote for Kenyatta, Uhuru Kenyatta. You still got that tribalism.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about numbers. It's about democracy. It's about the majority voting, right? It's not only for Kenya. It's not only Kenya. Look at the elections anywhere else. I lived in Switzerland for a very long time. People still identify themselves as French and German and Italian, right? So, but every time you talk about tribe, it's about Africa. If it's in Africa, it's demonized. If it's elsewhere, it's okay.
He's saying Kenya needs political parties based on ideas, but leaders often exploit tribal loyalty to advance personal gain, patronage and cronyism.
Well, you know, that's true of many other countries and many other places.
So it's true of Kenya.
And you know what? It's something. Look at the people who voted in our elections, in the last general elections, and tell me that they came from across the country, but the majority of them were youth, ignoring their tribal affiliation. Why? Because they believed in the ideas that were being put across. They believed in a manifesto that was being put across by the Jubilee Coalition. So we're moving up. It will, you know, Rome was not built in a day, Zeinab. We're going to be making progress. We're going to be making slow progress in Africa, right? But we want to make that progress ourselves. We want ownership. We want to make our mistakes and correct them ourselves. We don't want to be fingers pointed at us every time something goes wrong. So, well, you know, there go the Africans. Well, you know what? Africa does not have a monopoly of violence. It doesn't have a monopoly of bad leadership. I mean, that's shared across the world. And I can give you many examples of other parts of the world where this happens. Right?
What's going to happen to you now, though? Here you are, part of a government where your president is apparently going to be giving evidence via video link, perhaps, in November. You've got your vice president now at the Hague giving trial. How can these two men take care of the day-to-day process of running a country?
They are. They haven't been found wanting. And I don't see any problems going forward.
It's disruptive, isn't it?
In any case, well, you know what? It's annoying more than disrupting, actually. It's really annoying, seriously. And that's what Africans told me across the board when they saw my deputy president in a courtroom pleading. And, you know, in a way, it reminded them of days gone by, right? So it annoyed a lot of Africans to see that happening. But we don't have a deficit of leadership right now.
The country's run effectively and efficiently. With your vice president at the Hague and your president
at home.
To give evidence.
He's at home. He's at home. And I you know, they're going to, if the court doesn't decide to dismiss the cases, which should be the right thing to do. Because, again, as I told you, the pot of evidence is the same, 3 already dismissed. We hope that the other 3 will be dismissed shortly so that the ICC can look like a credible and legitimate court with legitimate procedures.
With legitimate procedures, got to leave it there. Foreign Minister of Kenya, Amina Mohamed, thank you very much indeed for coming on HARDtalk.
Thank you.